All right,
Hey, everybody.
welcome to Build Your Website with WordPress. And today's panelist is Nathan Smith. Welcome, Nathan.
Hey, thanks. So, hi. As Tim said, I'm Nathan Smith. I'm the digital literacy specialist for the Central Arkansas Library System. I teach a bunch of technology classes for the library. I was going to say at the library, but that's not true at the moment. But there's a ton of interesting stuff going on. You can certainly check out our website and see a lot of the cool programs we have. We've got an author who's written a book about the 1918 pandemic, who's going to talk about that book on at noon on Thursday. And I'm doing some technology classes. You can find all the technology classes that I do on, if you look at on the screen over here, at cals.org/tech-classes. And so if you, keep an eye on that. I'm probably going to post some things that I'll be doing in June pretty soon on that page as well. And I'd be happy to have you anytime. We're doing a bunch, obviously, of sort of webinars similar to this through the library as well. So I'd love to have you. Let's go ahead, though, and talk about the structure of this class. Basically, excuse me, this is a three-part sort of course thing. Sometimes I do it all in one day, and sometimes I do it in 3 parts like this. And so if you, if for some reason you didn't end up getting to register for tomorrow's session and Thursday's session, make sure you do that so you can join me for the rest of it, because we're definitely not going to get to all of the stuff that I want to show you today, since it's part 1 of 3. So the structure is going to go like this. This first session, I'm basically going to walk you through trying to, just setting up a website. If you are either only have the one screen that you're watching on right now to view on, or if you are, or if it's just going to be hard for you to concentrate on what I'm saying while also doing the thing, since you are going to get a recording of this, you are more than welcome and in fact encouraged, if it's going to be helpful to you, to go back and watch along when you're actually creating your site. And you can hold off creating your site today if you want to. Do it after the class, or do it along with the recorded version of the video. So so I don't want anybody to feel like, if I'm going a little faster than maybe you need to, I don't want you to feel pressure to like have to rush and keep up with exactly what's going on. So just know that that's one of the benefits of doing it this way is, you don't have to remember everything. You can watch it later if you feel like maybe you missed something or that sort of thing. So today we're going to focus on creating a website. Tomorrow we're going to focus on posting content to your website. So we're going to talk about posts and pages. We're going to talk about putting embedded content on your website, and we're going to talk about uploading media. So then the day after that, on Thursday, we're going to focus in on kind of fine-tuning the site, particularly things like using the customizer to make your site look and work exactly the way you want it to. So that'll be kind of the structure that we'll follow today. Today is kind of setting the stage and getting your website set up and the basic settings tweaked. So let's see, let's go ahead and dive in. So what I want to do is I want to, if you're following along, go ahead and head to wordpress.com up at the top here. And I'm going to talk just briefly about WordPress and content management systems in general, because it's kind of an important thing to have in your head as you move forward with this. so that so that you can, well, for reasons that will probably become clear here shortly. So the reason that we need content management systems is basically back in the day when I first started using the internet, you could tell if you had visited enough websites kind of which pages on a website the people who maintained it cared about and which ones they didn't so much. The pages that they cared about looked nice and new. All of the links on those pages worked. The menu, in the little navigation menu, all of the links that were there led somewhere and made sense. And there were no missing images or anything like that. And then as you dug further into the website and you found those pages they weren't as concerned about, you would find there was an older, clunkier looking version of the menu, and you might find some of the images that were there when they posted the page are missing now, and you might find that some of the links you needed in the menu didn't actually go anywhere, weren't actually there anymore, and a whole host of other things like that. And there'd just be kind of a mismatch a lot of times between the newest pages had a nice looking modern style, and the older pages looked old and they didn't match the look of the rest of the site. So the reason for that is back in the day when when the web was a lot newer, folks were having to update their websites manually anytime that they made a change. So if I wanted to add an additional option to the menu at the top of my page, I would have to go through every single page on my whole website and manually update that, menu. Now, folks could copy and paste, and there were other little tricks they could use to make it slightly easier on themselves. But at the end of the day, they had to update almost every page. And so content management systems allow us to avoid a lot of that extra work. What they do is they kind of automate a lot of the things like applying, a consistent style to all of your pages, keeping track of media like images and so forth, and making sure that links go to a page even if the address of that page changes, and so on and so forth. So content management systems allow us to focus not so much on dealing with the guts of the website and trying to tinker under the hood until we get it just right, and more on actually the content of the of the site. So the words and images, essentially the things we want to get across to our audience. And because we're talking about building a website for small businesses, that's super duper important, because almost everybody in a smaller organization has lots of different responsibilities that they're taking care of, and so making sure that the website's running might be a priority for a person in the organization, but it's almost certainly not their only job. And so using a content management system becomes pretty useful and important for that reason. So let's talk about WordPress specifically. WordPress is, as I mentioned, a content management system. And WordPress can take and you can use WordPress in a couple of different ways. One way that you can use WordPress is you can use it with some sort of general web hosting service. So things like GoDaddy and Bluehost and HostGator and all of those sorts of things. You can use any of those, hosting companies that you like, and they offer the ability to have your website essentially live on their computers so that folks can access them whenever they need to. That saves you the trouble of, back in the day, if you had your own website, you might, and some folks who are sort of hobbyists or have a you know, a personal website and like to do it yourself, you know, they might even have a computer sitting somewhere in their house that's a server. It's connected to the internet all the time. And if somebody tries to, you know, and if somebody goes to their website, that person's computer is actually talking to the computer that's sitting in this person's garage or whatever, and receiving a copy of the website from them, because that computer is their server. For most of us, we don't maintain a server infrastructure in our house or in our, you know, or at our place of business. We have a hosting service do it. And so you can use one of those hosting services like that. You can also use the hosting service WordPress.com. So that's what we're going to be using today in this class, because WordPress.com basically allows us to set aside all of the sort of, or a lot of the sort of maintenance tasks that you might do with other hosts and service providers, and just focus on running, or on how WordPress itself, the software, actually works. So that's why we're using WordPress.com, and it has a free version associated with it. So as you're following along with this class, you don't have to commit to anything. You don't have to put in your credit card anywhere, things like that. You can just build a site. You can either start building your actual website, or you can make kind of a dummy practice one. Either way is perfectly fine. And it's just kind of up to you what you want to do as far as that goes. But I say all that to say, we're using WordPress.com, but you don't have to use WordPress.com to use WordPress. WordPress is available lots of different places. You can use it with lots of different hosting services. And I will also just warn you, WordPress.com is a little bit different than versions of WordPress that you might find elsewhere, but most of the functionality is essentially the same. It's mostly cosmetic differences between that and others. So let's go ahead and dive in, I think. So here on WordPress.com, I'm on the, you know, kind of the home page for it. And depending on your situation, you'll either click Login or Get Started up here. If you click Get Started, that's assuming that you don't have a WordPress.com account. If you've had a blog or a website on WordPress.com before, then you have an account, and you can just click a login to sign into it. If you don't, if you are, excuse me, if you're starting for the first time, you can click Get Started. Excuse me. And it's going to pop up with something like this, where you can create a WordPress.com account. So just briefly to show you this form, and then I'm going to actually click, or I'm actually going to log in and create a site associated with my existing account. To walk you through this just briefly, you fill in your email address, the email address that you want to be the contact email for your website. No one will necessarily see that email address, but you'll need to have it associated with your WordPress.com account. Then you'll want to choose a username. When you choose a username, the main thing to bear in mind about that is people are going to see that. So you want to make sure it's not embarrassing and it's not incomprehensible. If it's just a jumble of letters and numbers, that's not going to do much good. But also if it's, you know, if it's schmoopsipoo65, that might not be the best option. So so make it something that that you're comfortable with your customers seeing, and make it something that that makes sense, and that'll be your username. It also does have to be unique. Nobody else, you know, nobody else on WordPress.com can have that same username. So if it's already taken, you got to choose something else. Finally, a password. Make sure you fill in a password here. My suggestion would be to come up with something unique. something you haven't used before on other services. That's super duper important, particularly if this is your business website, because hey, if somebody gets a hold of your password for something else and you've reused that password on WordPress.com, then they can change your website. So make sure it's a password you haven't used before. Make sure it's something that's reasonably long. The current suggestion is around 16 characters long at this point. And make sure it has various types of characters. So letters, or lowercase and uppercase letters, numbers, and symbols. If you do that, it's going to be really hard for somebody to crack your password. And as long as you don't use a password you previously used before, then you should probably be in a pretty good spot. All right, so, and you can click create your account down there. You can also, if you want to, use Google or the Google or Apple login services to create your account. If you do either of those, that has the advantage of not, of essentially allowing you to create a, or allowing you to not have to remember another password, and also making it potentially easier to sign in. The downside is if someone gets into your Google or your Apple account, they also have access to your WordPress account. So your mileage may vary. I'm going to click login to create a site for your existing account down here. All right, and there we have it. I'm going to sign in to this one, continue, and log in. All right. So after you've created your account, and make sure, by the way, if you're creating a new account, at some point you're going to need to confirm your email address. So just make sure, at least by the end of this, that you've gone into your email and confirmed, clicked the little confirm button to get your email address, or to verify to WordPress.com that you actually own the email address that you're using. Okay, so one of the next steps that you're going to see is this. Let's get your site a domain. Enter your site's name or use keywords that describe it to get started. So if I click here, I've got a blank, and I can type in a domain name that I want. So let's see. Just a moment. Something seems to be going on with the. There we go. For some reason, my my thing is showing me. It was saying that a lot of folks couldn't see the screen, so I wanted to make sure everybody could see for the most part before I moved on. Okay, so what you want here, your domain for a website is kind of like the address of a for a physical building. So for example, I work at the main library downtown, and whenever I refer to it, unless I'm specifically telling someone where to go or where to send some mail or something, when I refer to it, I always say the main library, rather than saying 100 South Rock Street, 72201, which is the address of the main library. So the domain is the address. It's something.com or something.org or something.pizza. Yes, that is a real one. And so, so this is what it's trying to get at, is to set up an address for your site. If you are using the free version of WordPress.com to follow along with me, and I'm pretty sure most of you will be, excuse me, if you are using that, what you're going to need to, or you're going to, when you set up an address, you're going to be using what's called a subdomain. If you think of a domain name like something.com as the address of a building, a subdomain is kind of like an apartment inside of that building. If you live in an apartment building, you still have your own address, 123 Main Street, apartment 527 or whatever. But you don't have, but you are, but you know, if someone came to 123 Main Street, then they would at least be at the building. A subdomain is kind of like that. So your subdomain that's included with a free version of WordPress.com is whatever you put in, something .wordpress.com. You can always upgrade later on to a paid plan that includes a full domain name, you know, something.com or something.org or whatever. But for now, I'm just going to choose a subdomain. So let's see. Okay, so because this particular webinar is a collaboration between CALS, the Central Arkansas Library System, and the ASBTDC, and it's May of 2020. The one that I chose was CALS ASBTDC 520. That's not great if you're really, something like that is not going to be great if you're doing this for real, but this is an example, so I'm going to use something pretty random. So I should have, looks like there's a problem here. My thing says 100% of people can't see my screen anymore. So, okay, now we're back.
You're good.
Okay, good. Does that bar do anything? Should I be paying attention to that? Have you lost me at any point?
No, we've not lost you. We've had some feedback from folks that they're seeing you just fine.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Mary Ellen.
Excellent. Thank you. So, okay, down here underneath these two sort of big rectangle areas, we've got, they're offering me CALS ASBTDC 520.com and CALS ASBTDC 520.blog. Those are both options that are included in paid WordPress.com plans. We're going to talk about the paid plan versus the free plan in a minute, so don't get too hung up on that right now. And again, as I said, you can always upgrade or downgrade as you need to. And then down here, but right underneath these two big blocks is this first line of this whole list here. That's the only one that's going to be free. Since I've done this, since I've done just CALS ASBTDC.wordpress.com before, that one's no longer available. So what it's done is it's added this long string of numbers to the end of that and then added .wordpress.com. But when I added the 520, that one is available. And so down here, I've got that. It says free and it says select. So I'm going to pick that. Unless you just already know what address you want for your site and you know for sure that you're going to use WordPress.com specifically as your host, then, as I said, I would probably opt for the free plan and use a subdomain for now, particularly since, like, you know, you're not going to be rolling out your website far and wide at the end of today's class. You know, we're going to do a lot more work on it. So you'll be fine to start with that and then upgrade if you decide you want to. Okay, so here is the part where they want to sell me a plan. Fair enough. What I can do, so I've got right here the little link that says start with a free site. I'm going to click on that in a moment. For now, though, down here, I'll talk just briefly about what these paid plans are. The personal plan is basically designed for a blog, so you have a certain number of domain endings that are available to you for free with that plan. Excuse me, and some basic other things, including maybe the most useful thing that comes with paying something for WordPress.com, depending on your needs, which is you get access to the email and live chat support with WordPress.com's support team. So if you go with the free version, I've always used the free version myself. If you go with the free version, you don't have access to that live support. And so you'll need to ask your friend, Mr. Google, which is what I usually do. But if you decide you want that, then that's an option that's available to you. The $8 a month premium one adds some other stuff like CSS editing, so you can tweak the look of your site in very specific ways. If you're familiar with what's called CSS, cascading style sheets. It gives you a bunch of storage space, and it gives you access to a lot of the, as it says, premium themes. So themes or designs that you would normally have to pay to access, you would get for free with no additional cost, I guess, with this particular plan. The business plan here is basically opens up a lot more options for you. You can add your own themes, so you can purchase themes from somewhere else, or you can hire someone to design your, a custom theme that's just for you. Actually, as it happens, the library's website, cals.org, we actually have a custom theme that's designed specifically for our website. So you could do something like that and really make it, your site just like fully branded. You get a bunch of storage and all sorts of other things. Oh yeah, and you can also install additional plugins. Plugins add certain extra functionality to your site. We'll talk about them just briefly, although we won't go into great detail about plugins during this class, because we're mostly talking about how WordPress works in general. And anytime we talk about plugins, then you have to get, most of the time you have to get pretty specific about this plugin works in this way, this plugin works in this way. And so a lot of that information, if we went too deep on it, wouldn't be applicable to a lot of folks. Speaking of which, the e-commerce functionality over here on the side. In part 3, I am going to touch just briefly on some of the e-commerce functionality that you can add to WordPress. WordPress does not come with e-commerce functionality built in, but there are a bunch of plugins that you can install on it to do different types of, e-commerce, selling stuff online kinds of tasks. Because it's not something that's built into WordPress directly, and because you could use a variety of plugins depending on your needs, I'm not going to go into great detail about it. I'm going to give you some suggestions of a few plugins that are well respected and some places to look for information about how to use those and so forth. I'm not going to get too specific with it, because some of the folks here won't need to use that functionality at all. Some of the folks here will use that functionality a lot, and some people will be like, well, I want them to be able to do this one particular thing, and so going one way or another is basically going to make some of the material useless to a large swath of people. So I just want to set that up front, so that way we don't, we're not, folks are not like, well, when are we going to get to that? As I said, I'll give you some pointers in part 3 on Thursday, but we won't go in depth on that, because really, before you start selling stuff on a website, you need to know how to make a website work, and that's what this class is about. All right, so let's go up here, and I'm going to click Start with a Free Site. Hooray, your site will be ready shortly. Okay, so this is the point at which if you didn't have a WordPress.com account prior to this class, you're going to receive the email to confirm, so that you can confirm your so that you can confirm that you own your email address. So make sure you open up your email and take a look there, find the email from WordPress.com and click that button that says like confirm or whatever it is. Usually it's a blue button, I think, and then we can push forward a little bit. So I'm going to give just a moment or so for folks to get that bit accomplished. And I'm going to drink some of my Gatorade. All right, I'm going to call that good. And if you're in the middle of that process, you'll have some time to catch up here over the next couple of minutes or so. So no worries, just keep going, and you'll be there in a moment. So I'm on this screen right now in sort of the back end of my site. Let me kind of show you a few of the basic things to look at here. So when you're in the back end of your site, over here on the left-hand side is what's called the My Site or My Sites menu. That's going to be our primary navigational menu in WordPress.com. Now, in other versions of WordPress that are not hosted on WordPress.com, you'll see something slightly different. So let me actually show you what that looks like. The back end of the library systems website looks something like this. So this is what's called the dashboard, which is kind of the primary navigational tool that you use in the back end of non-WordPress.com WordPress websites. But as I said, the options that you have are very, very similar. So even if you have to switch over to a different, to non-WordPress.com versions of WordPress, it's not really going to be a problem. You should be able to get around just fine, and all the concepts are, well, exactly the same because it's all WordPress. So there's a so that's kind of the way the back end works. For each option here on this menu, you have like a little drop down arrow. You can click on that and it'll give you some sub items here. So if I click on site, I have pages, posts, media, comments, and feedback. Click on design, I have customize and themes. Click on tools, I've got plugins, import, export, marketing. Y'all can read, you see what I'm getting at here. So that's going to be our primary navigational tool. You can still get to the dashboard, and I'll show you toward the end of class how that works, because it's it's kind of important to know between the first session and the second session. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to just take a glance at how the site looks so far. So up here at the top, you'll notice it says, next where it says My Home, it says View Site. I can click on that and I can see what my new sort of nascent site looks like. Mine may or may not look exactly like yours. Used to be in the flow of creating a site on WordPress.com, it would you would put in like what industry you were in and you know, a whole bunch of other stuff like that that basically WordPress would use that information to pick a theme for your site that you could use. So you might have the same theme as I do, you might have a different theme, and if you're not sure whether you have the same theme or a different theme, that's okay. We'll talk about it. You'll understand here shortly. But it should look something like this. Up here at the top, it says your site hasn't launched yet. Only you can see it until it is launched, and I can dismiss that to get it out of the way, or I can click Launch Site, and my site will be public to anybody who knows, excuse me, the address at least. I have my site title. I have some links up here to various pages on my site. And then I have basically some example content that that's been included for me for the or by WordPress.com. So I'll be able to, you know, we'll be customizing this stuff and changing it as we move forward. But for now, I mean, it doesn't look half bad. It's a pretty good starting place, to be honest. Let's start out by setting some basic settings, though. Up here at the top, since I am signed into my WordPress.com account, I'll see this black bar up here. The black bar is always up here at the top of my, it's always up here at the top of my page when I'm signed into WordPress.com and when I'm browsing, well, any WordPress.com site. So even if you, so if you were to visit my site at some point, you would see this black bar at the, you would still see this black bar at the top of your screen, even though you're not on your site anymore. The reason for that is both of them are hosted on WordPress.com. I have the My Sites button, or the My Site button if you only have one site so far, up here at the top left. I have the reader. WordPress.com has this weird newsreader function that, I mean, it's fine, but I guess it's kind of more a vestige of when WordPress.com was primarily a blog hosting service. If any of you guys remember Zanga from back in the day, or MySpace, or not MySpace, LiveJournal, things like that, is basically kind of used to be sort of positioned more like that and have more of that functionality. So that's kind of left over from that. This right button up here, if I click on that, will basically take me immediately to a blank blog post where I can start writing. And we'll talk about writing a blog post tomorrow during, during that session. I have a little avatar here, and depending on, it uses this service called Gravatar, which is run by the same people who make WordPress. So if you've set up an avatar, a little picture like that on some other site or service that uses Gravatar, then you'll already see your picture up there. If not, then it may be blank, and that's kind of just like a little silhouette of a person, and that's fine too. And then this little bell here tells me if I have some kind of notifications. Somebody sent me a message in my site, or WordPress.com has something to tell me, things like that. So up here at the top, I'm going to click My Sites, and that's going to take me back to the back end of my site, and take me to this little page again here. And then what I want to do now is I want to go over here on the left and click the little drop-down arrow next to Manage. And I want to click on Settings right here. When I do that, I get my I get some basic things that I want to set up about my site, and I want to make sure and kind of go through these with you just briefly, so that way you know what this does, because this is good sort of foundational stuff to have in your mind. So the first thing I want to show you is this site title here. Because of the sort of short setup process that I went through, it didn't ask me for a title for my site, and I probably want one. Again, in my analogy earlier, when I was talking about, or you know, if you think about, I work at the main library. The main library is the name of the building, and 100 South Rock Street is the address. So you've already come up with an address for your site, but you don't have a name for your site yet. And so you'll want to put something in here. Most likely, since this is about creating a website for your small business, the name of your website is going to be the name of your business. But if you're doing this for some other purpose, then you can name your site something clever, or you can, or whatever. The point is, the name here is not the address of your site. Those are two different things. So I'll call this one Build Your Website with WordPress. And then the site tagline. So depending on how you have your site configured, we'll talk specifically about what I mean by that in a moment. But depending on how you have your site configured, this may or may not show up. But your tagline is basically, as it says, in a few words, explain what this site is about. So if your business has a motto or slogan, then you probably want to fill that in here. If you have, you know, if you were doing this as a personal site, or you know, for some other purpose, then you might put, you know, just a little something in here, a quote that you really like, or you know, or just a sort of very, very brief explanation of what the site is. If you're headed into, like, I'd say, if what you put in this tagline area is longer than 2 short sentences, it's too long. Keep it very pithy is really what I would say about that. So I'm going to say something like teaching technology to Central Arkansas. Okay, cool. Down here under site address, you can add other addresses if you own a domain name through some other provider like GoDaddy or hover.com, or, you know, Google Domains, or any of those. You can redirect those to this site, and you have a and you can also, of course, purchase domain names directly through WordPress.com. Down here under language English, if you are writing your site in English, if the content that your visitors see will be in English, you want to leave this alone. If the content that your visitors see will be in some other language, you want to change this box to be that language. And then down here, if your primary language is something other than English and you prefer to change that, you can follow this link and that'll take you to those settings. Down here under site time zone, looks like by default it has selected Chicago, which is right. But if for some reason this says something different, like UTC plus 0 is kind of the default traditionally, then you'll want to scroll up until you find America in bold here, and then scroll down until you find Chicago, because here in Central Arkansas, we are on Central Time, and we do follow daylight savings time. So Chicago is always has the same time as us, and so that's the right thing. You might even click this little link if it suggests it, but it doesn't have the right thing there. Okay, so if you change any of these settings like I did, you'll want to scroll back up to the top here and click Save Settings. Excuse me. You'll also notice I skipped over this site icon. We're going to talk about that at the end of class because we're going to circle back to that. We're going to circle back to that before too long. or not today, but in one of the other sessions. Down below where it says launch site, there are there's some options here that you can choose from, and I'll walk you through those just briefly so that you know how you want to set it up. There's one setting that probably most of you will be using, but your mileage may vary. So I want to make sure that you'll know what's going on here. So once you've clicked this launch site thing, that'll mean essentially that your site is ready for at least some visitors. And then you have a few options. Option number one is coming soon. And it says your site is hidden from visitors behind a coming soon notice until it is ready for viewing. So in other words, you'll say like this site is here. If this were 1995, you'd probably have like a little animation of a guy with a pickaxe, like in a under construction thing. So that's basically that. Underneath is public. Public is the setting that probably most of y'all are going to use. If you have this public selected and you don't have this box down here checked, then what's going to happen is basically your site's out there for the world. And so anyone who has the address can access it. Down here, this little checkbox that says do not allow search engines to index my site. If you check that box, but you leave this set on public, what's going to happen is anyone who has the address of your site can access it. But if they don't have the address of the site, they're probably not going to be able to get to it. The reason being, when Google or Bing or whoever else, DuckDuckGo, comes along and says, hey, WordPress.com, you got any new websites for me? Then WordPress.com is going to look at your site and your site's like, and so it'll, no, I don't have any new sites for you, head on. And so, so your site, if that box is checked, your site will not show up on search engines like Google and Bing. If that box is unchecked and public is set, then Google and Bing and DuckDuckGo and everybody will be able to just to get in there and will be able to list it in the search results. Now, I want to emphasize that is not to say that your site will be ranked high on search results when it first launches. Chances are it won't be unless your company has a very unique, or your website has a very unique name and somebody types that exact thing into the search engine. And also at least about 24 hours after you launch your site like this, it probably won't show up in search results at all, because all of those search engines have to what they call index, where they're basically taking your site and adding it to their giant list of sites that that exist in the world and that can be found using their search engine. So I just want to say that because sometimes folks can get discouraged if they, if it's a shoe store and they launch their website and then, an hour later they type shoes into Google and their site is not at the top of the search results or even a few pages down. That's normal. So, so that's the public options there. And then private. This one to me is not that useful, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. Basically, if you set your site to private here, what's going to happen is only you, when you're signed in, and other people that you designate can access your site at all. So, so what I mean by that specifically is if you go to your website and you're not signed into your WordPress.com account, you're going to be prompted to sign in. And when you sign in, you can access your site. If someone else wants to go to your site, they will also see that sign in screen. If they don't have a WordPress.com account at all, they will need to create one. They're not creating an account with you, they're creating an account with WordPress.com. They have to have one of those if they want to access your site. On top of that, once they have a WordPress.com account, their account has to specifically be approved by you as someone who can access your site. So there's essentially 2 layers of security there, but that's also 2 layers of keeping people out, and so a website is probably not the absolute best thing for you if you're trying to do that specifically. If you're running, I mean, you might be running a blog that's only for your friends and family or things like that. That's an option, you know, that's something you might do here. Most folks, though, are not going to be using that option. And then there's some other stuff down here. Well, I guess I'll point out these other 2 things quickly that are pretty important. There's a delete your content and a delete your site permanently option here. If you click delete your content, what's going to happen is you'll keep the site's current address and you'll keep the theme that you've set up there, the design. We'll talk about themes in just a second. You'll keep the design that's set up there and you'll keep the address. But everything that you've written, all the images that you posted on your site, all of those sorts of things, that all goes away when you use this option. So that basically you get a blank slate, more or less. The other one, delete your site permanently, is the nuclear option. So if you choose this option, obviously all the text that you've posted on your site, the images, videos, whatever else you posted on your site, all of that goes away. In addition to that, you know, you no longer have a theme associated with your site, and you're even giving up your site's address. So specifically what that means is if you're using the WordPress.com subdomain, like mine is Cal's ASBTDC 520.wordpress.com, excuse me, if I use this delete your site permanently option, what's going to happen is neither I nor anyone else will ever be able to use Cal's ASBTDC 520.wordpress.com as an address on WordPress.com ever again. So you're shutting yourself and everyone else out of the possibility of using that address. Sometimes that's what you need, but you probably don't. I mean, honestly, most of the time, like even if you're moving your site to a new hosting provider or something, what you probably want to do is just redirect your old, you know, your old address to the new site. And so, you know, if you need this, it's here. But if not, then just be careful because you can't undo it. Okay, so let's talk just a little bit about the structure of the site, and we'll talk briefly about themes, and then I'll give you just a little bit of optional homework, and we'll wrap it up. So first things first, let's talk about the site and the structure of it. So I'm going to go up, and here it says site title. It still hasn't updated that yet, but that's okay. I'm going to move up here. Next to that, I'm going to click on the little house that appears there, and that's going to take me to the main page of the site. Now you'll notice the title that I added on my back here in the settings page shows up right here at the top. My tagline shows up down here below. And honestly, pretty much everything else is the same. That's cool. We'll get into that a little bit later on. Next to that title, I've got my links here: home, blog, about, and contact. So the home page is this main page that's out front here. The way that the home page, or the way that mine is set up, I'm hoping everybody ended up with the same theme that I did and the same general structure, since apparently we didn't have much control over that. If you didn't, please let me know, because then I'll kind of know how to proceed a little bit better. For now, I'm going to assume that everybody did. So I have this home, blog, about, and contact. Each of these takes me to a different page on the site. The way our home page is set up, the home page is what we call a static page in WordPress terminology, or just a page a lot of times. Basically, that means information that is that's set, that's not really going to change all that much. That is and that we want pretty accessible to the visitors to the site, regardless of when they're coming. On the other hand, the blog has something slightly different. If I click blog over here, that's going to take me to a different page that shows me a list of the posts on my blog. And when I click on one of these, that'll take me to the actual content of the post itself. So it's important to talk about the difference between posts and pages, or blog posts and static pages. So a page is content that is, you might say, timeless. Things like, for example, the about page that might have, say, my bio if it's just a personal website for me, or that might have, you know, if I'm doing this for a company, the history of that company, or you know, our mission is to do such and such a thing, or, you know, here's our staff, you know, everybody who works in our organization, and a little, you know, bio about them, or whatever. All of that stuff is not going to change that much, hopefully. And so that's timeless content. In a sense, it's you know, it's not going to be, it's probably not going to be out of date in, you know, in 3 months or 6 months or whatever. And if it is, then I can just make little tweaks to it, and most of the rest of it will be just fine. As opposed to the timeless content on a page, a blog post is expected to contain, you might say, timely information. So a blog post might be, if this is a, you know, if this is for your store, it might be, these are the sales we have coming up in, you know, in the month of May, or, you know, we received, you know, we're voted best, you know, best tea shop by the Arkansas Times, or whatever the case may be. You know, things that are of the moment. If you're doing a personal blog, you know, you might, you know, you might post your review of the latest movie, or you might, you know, you might analyze a new episode of your favorite TV show that aired last night, or you might talk about this cool book you read, or a nice virtual program that you went to at the library, those sorts of things. So all of that stuff is kind of, you know, has some timing associated with it. A lot of news sites that you find online are basically, essentially, structure-wise, they're just a blog. And, you know, in each news article that gets posted to the site is another blog post, as far as the software that runs the website is concerned. So WordPress was designed as blogging software. It was designed to sort of make it easy to create a blog without having to know a whole bunch about building a website. And so whenever you post a, you know, and so you always have a blog associated with your site, whether you use it or whether you even give your visitors a link to it is up to you. But you're always going to have a blog associated with your site. And you definitely always need to know the difference between a page and a post, because that's going to matter a great deal in how your website treats your content. So my about link here, we've got this sort of basic about page that, you know, with a room for a little headshot, and you've got your your text content over there. And then this contact page gives you just a basic contact form over here. If someone fills in this contact form, then they will, then you'll get a notification in your WordPress.com account, and you'll get an email at the email address that you registered for WordPress.com with. So that's a good way for them to contact you, and they won't have to have your email address to do it. So that can be kind of nice. So that's the basic layout of our site. So we have 3 static pages: the home page, the about page, and the contact page. And then we have our blog, which has 3 example blog posts that are all called Introduce Yourself Example Post, as it turns out. So we'll talk a lot more about that in tomorrow's session, but I just wanted to give you the lay of the land here. Let's go back over and let's talk about themes a little bit. So on the left-hand side, if you've got this little My Sites menu over here on the left, then that you can click on, or then you can follow me there. If you don't have that, if you're looking at the full site and it's showing it like all the way across, then you can actually go up and click on My Sites or My Site up there at the top left, and that'll get you there too. Once you've got the menu, you'll want to click on Design, or like click the little arrow next to Design, and you'll want to click on Themes. And let's talk about themes a little bit. So themes are a really cool part of WordPress and of content management systems in general, because if you had, because basically they determine a lot of how your site is laid out, and they determine essentially the look and feel of your site. If you had all the other functionality of content management systems, but you didn't have themes, then basically everybody's website would look the exact same and work the exact same. And websites are definitely a thing where one size doesn't fit all. And so for each, so themes allow you a chance to sort of customize and make things look the way you want them to, without spending a ton of time on it. Because the thing about it is, okay, when I created my site, WordPress.com assigned a theme to me, which is called Hever, H-E-V-E-R. That's the one that I'm using right now. But I can change to a different theme. When I do that, pretty much all of the content that I've created stays, well, all of the content stays on my website. So I don't have to worry about losing my work if I'm switching from one theme to another, although things may shift around essentially. But I can just focus on, at that point, the structure of the site and getting everything to look the way I want it to look. So let's see. So right now, I have this thing that says recommended themes, and I can scroll down and see some that they suggest I might be interested in, including, oh, hey, there's the one I'm using right now. I also have this customize button. We'll talk about that in part 3 on Thursday. And I have this info, which it'll take me to the info page for this theme. I'll show you the info page for a different theme here in a moment. And then down here, if I move my mouse over any of these, I'll click on, or if I click info there, that takes me to the info page for this theme. Then there's a ... button down here in the corner. I can click live demo and see a demo site using this theme. I can activate the theme right away on my site, or I can go to the info or the support information for it from here. I'll go ahead and pull up the info. Okay, cool. So this particular theme is called Maywood. It's made by a company called Automatic, which is the company that runs WordPress.com and makes WordPress. if I scroll down a little bit, then I can see essentially some examples of what content could look like if I were using this particular theme on my site over here on the right. Then over here on the left, I can see kind of a description of what they think this theme is particularly good for. And I can jump down to different little boxes on this left-hand side here. So it gives me some basics of how to set things up for this particular theme, and how to add content that'll be featured on my homepage. It gives me some information that I'm going to show you tomorrow about adding your logo, and customizing the navigation, connecting it with your social media accounts, and so on. We'll talk about the whole social media thing in part 3 as well. And you get some other kind of technical information about it. But you can sort of see like, oh, okay, well, this might work for me. I can also click this Open Live Demo, and that is going to bring up this little page right here. I'll hit Close and Accept down here. You'll always see this little cookie warning, just because to comply with certain laws in Europe and California and various other places. So I can scroll around here and I can actually check out essentially a full example website that uses this particular theme. I click View Our Menu. It takes me to this menu page here, and so on and so forth. So if I want to set this up, I can click Try and Customize. That takes me to the customizer, which again we'll talk about in part 3, so that I can tweak the look of it, or I can just click Activate and apply basically the default version of this theme to my site, and then I can go through and make whatever changes I need to in order to kind of maximize it. Some themes will add additional features and functionality. Some themes are just, some themes just strictly sort of will move things around or change your fonts and your colors, that sort of thing. But all of that stuff, fonts and colors, the layout of your pages, and a variety of other things like that are mostly aesthetic things, are dictated by your theme on your website. So I highly recommend you look around at the different themes and see what you see there. There are a lot of themes that are free, and there are some that you can also pay for if you want to. I see. Okay, so the recommended themes they gave me are essentially the ones that are pretty basic. So there's no sort of advanced functionality. If I click See All Themes, it says these themes offer more power and flexibility, but can be harder to set up and customize. So you have a search box down here, and you can kind of filter it by specific features that you want in your theme, a specific kind of layout or a specific number of columns that you're looking for, the style or the subject, essentially what the content of your site is about, so that you can so that you can get a theme that sort of complements that. And definitely, so I would definitely recommend taking some time to look through these and kind of see like what looks like you and your business, what looks like the kind of things that you want to the kind of feel that you want to have for your, because essentially in a lot of ways, particularly right now where folks aren't doing as much sort of in-person shopping around and getting out and things like that, your website is sort of the that's almost more of the first impression that you'll make on your customers than the front of your business is, if you have a location like that. And of course, some businesses don't even have a customer-facing location. So in that case, this is your front doorstep. This is the facade of your building as far as your customers are concerned. So you want to make it look good. Okay, so let's talk about the, again, optional homework, and then we'll switch over and round out the time with a bit of Q&A. I expect some of the questions that we'll get will be things that I'll say, well, we're going to talk about that tomorrow, or we're going to talk about that on Thursday. But you know, some of it will definitely be worthwhile things to talk about at any point. Okay, so here's what I'd like to suggest. Now, as Tim mentioned toward the beginning of class, if you click on your little toolbar for GoToWebinar where it says handouts, you can download that document file, and there will be a link to the little zip file that has all of my example files in it. If you, if you're kind of just playing around with things for now, or if you don't have time to do what I'm about to suggest, then feel free to use those example assets on your site. They're all sort of public domain resources and stuff, so you know there's no possibility of getting in any kind of legal trouble for using them, things like that. So so you should be safe as far as that goes. But what I would suggest is to gather your own sort of media to a certain extent. First thing that I want to suggest is find somewhere between find like 3 to 5 high resolution images that you want to use on your website. There are a few different options here. Option number 1, if you have your own images of some sort, photos of your business, or photos that that sort of set the tone for what you'd like your website to feel like, things like that. If you have that, then wonderful, great, go for it. But you do want to make sure, as I said, that they're pretty high resolution. I would say around 4 megapixels or so is probably the level of detail that you want. Basically, it's hard to explain exactly how to check that, but I would say if you zoom into about 100 or to 100% on the image on your screen, and you can see the little pixels that make up the image, then it's too low resolution of an image. You want to try and get something that's got a little more detail to it. So if you have your own, wonderful. If you don't have your own, of course you can check with someone you know who's an artist or a photographer and see if they have something that you can use. Make sure you get permission. Artists, you may be surprised to learn, want to get paid for their work, and so you don't just want to do a Google image search and pick the first thing that comes up, because chances are that's going to be a copyrighted image that you don't have permission to use, and you could get in trouble for that. And honestly, it's just not very kind to use someone's work without their permission. So yeah, you can get a hold of it from somebody else. You can also use a free and royalty-free stock image site. That works pretty well as well. There are 3 that I use fairly regularly, and I usually check them in this order because there's, well, I'll tell you in a sec. So the one that I usually check first is unsplash.com, UNSPLASH, the word splash with UN before it, unsplash.com. This site has the smallest catalog, I guess, of the sites that I'm going to show you, but in general, they're about they're the highest quality typically. So So I usually check here first. They have a smaller selection, but if I find something that's going to work for me, usually it's going to be really good. If I don't find something useful there, then I usually move on to pexels.com, P-E-X-E-L-S, like pixels, those little squares that make up the image, but with an E instead of an I. This place has a larger selection, but a little, you know, some of the stuff is a little lower quality, so I usually don't go there first. And then finally, if I don't find anything on either of those two, I'll go to pixabay.com. This one has the largest catalog of them, but I'd say a lot of them are kind of like, there's a lot of stuff on there that's sort of like clip art and things like that that may or may not necessarily be that may or may not necessarily give you the most professional look if you use them. So anything that you find on any of those sites will work in terms of it being legal to use on your site and things like that. And most of it's pretty high quality stuff still, honestly. So 3 to 5 high resolution images that we can use in sort of a gallery or as headers, things like that on your site. Item number 2, I would suggest finding a logo and or icon for your site. So those are two slightly different things. Your logo, if you're a business and you have a logo, then you're good. Your logo is your logo. Optimally, you would have a version of your logo that is a PNG file. So the file name will be something .png with a transparent background. That way you don't have an ugly white or black box around your logo when you post it, when you put it in its spot on your website. The icon is slightly different because it's made for a lot smaller format here. So for example, with this particular site, their logo is here and the icon is up here next to the name of the page. And that's exactly where this icon that we're talking about will be featured. It's going to look real tiny. So you want to make sure that you have something that's either round or square and that reads at a really tiny size. If it's a picture of you, even if you are the sole proprietor of your business and the business is like Nathan Smith Inc. or whatever, if it's a picture of you, it's not going to work well there. It's just going to look like a blob of skin tone, basically. So it needs to be something really small and kind of maybe cartoonish that reads at that size. And that may be your logo, so possible there. And then finally, some text. So some text that you want to show up on your website somewhere. So if you have a few paragraphs of marketing copy, or if you have, a little story you wrote or whatever, doesn't matter. Or you can do what I do in my example, which is I downloaded, basically I'm going to copy and paste a chapter of a classic novel that's in the public domain. So just some text that you want to use on your site. You can write something if you want to, if you don't have anything already pre-written. And that's pretty much, oh wait, one last thing. Take a look at YouTube, find a video that you like, and then just grab the address of that video, or just know where to find it quickly, because we'll use that in tomorrow's session when I show you how to embed content. Again, any of that stuff is optional, but it's going to make your website yours rather than something that's just like mine. That's pretty much it. We have another 5 minutes or so. What questions do we have before we wrap it up for today?
All right, so good job there, as always. And we have had a few questions come in. One of the comments just a moment ago was they had some problems opening the handout in Word, so I will see about getting that up in PDF for those that might have a problem with that. Chalabra wanted to know what was the third thing you just suggested for homework. I think that was Pixabay or going to YouTube, one of the two.
So, okay, so yeah, I'll run through that really quick. So again, 3 to 5 high resolution images. So a nice photo or even drawings or something like that that's got a good level of detail to it. That's item number 1. Item number 2 is something that is a logo and or an icon. Those can be the same thing if your logo is something that reads at a pretty small size, or they might be something different if if your logo is like a whole word spelled out in in a crazy script or something like that, then it's going to be a bad icon for your site. So you'll want to get something small, maybe grab one of those letters from the script, or some other little tiny image that represents your site or your business. And then number 3 was some text that you might want on your site, just something that you have permission to use, either something you wrote or something that's in the public domain. And then number 4 was find a YouTube video that you want to embed and be able to get to that fairly quickly.
Okay, next up was Kamisha was asking, did you say find a YouTube video and copy the link for use tomorrow?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, copying the link is probably the easiest way to do it. Then you don't have to do that during class. But I probably will copy my link during class, so no shade if you do.
Okay, Lavana wanted to know, how do we save our work without clicking on publish?
Okay, so if you're working on writing a page or a post, then you'll want to save it as a draft, and that would be get out of here. Okay. There we go. There's a save draft button right here. All right, what else we got? Lou?
Oh, I'm sorry. How can I contact Nathan Smith directly?
You can email digital@cals.org. I can't get super duper in depth on like tech support type questions usually for that. I do have occasionally, I'm hoping to start doing these more, but I do occasionally have what I call open lab sessions, which are like a time where basically I have a little bit of specific time where I can work with someone. But yeah, if you have general questions, that sort of thing, then yeah, digital@cals.org.
Okay, and for those of you that are having trouble with the docx file and opening that in Word, I just hung a PDF version of the same document. It also has a link to download the zip file with the images, and that's down there in your handouts area. So if you go down to the bottom of your control panel in handouts, you'll see you can get the file either as a Word docx file or an Adobe PDF portable document file. So that answers all the most recent questions. We had some questions came in during the program that I answered, but some of the folks might want to hear answers to these. So one of which Hannah asked, if we pick a theme and decide to change it later, will the content move over to the new theme automatically?
Yes, most definitely. You may have to do some tweaking to the settings of the theme to get everything to show up, and if you customized your old theme in some specific way that is that's associated with that theme. Those customizations probably won't roll over, but all of your content, your text, your images, you know, videos, like pages, posts, all of that stuff does move over completely seamlessly to the new theme.
And Alisheva asked, what's the difference between WordPress.com and WordPress.org?
So WordPress.org is where the WordPress software like project lives. So WordPress is actually open source, free software, WordPress itself. So if you go to WordPress.org, you can download a copy of the WordPress software, and then you can install it on whatever computers you want to, including, you know, including like host, you know, wherever you have your hosting for your website and things like that. So WordPress itself is technically completely free for the full version of it. And that project is hosted on WordPress.org. WordPress.com is a hosting service, a lot like these other things like GoDaddy and HostGator and, you know, Bluehost and so forth. WordPress.com is a hosting service like that. The only but it's specifically designed for WordPress websites, and it kind of cuts out a lot of the sort of maintenance that you might otherwise have to do with one of those other hosting platforms to make your WordPress website the absolute best it could be. But there's kind of a trade-off there, because it's a little, you know, if you want to be able to do absolutely everything with WordPress, it's more expensive to do that on WordPress.com than it is to have a WordPress site that's hosted elsewhere. But it you know, that's a lot of times the trade-off. You get something that's a little more convenient, but it's a little more expensive, and that's basically what you got there.
Right. And WordPress.org is home for the very famous WordPress Codex, which is all the documentation that you'd ever want to know about how do you do things in WordPress.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Travis asked about, can you have a member who visits a site change the language for themselves, for example, English to Spanish? This is when you were talking about the language settings for the dashboard.
Yeah, I think by default, with the options that we have on the free version of WordPress.com, you probably can't, although they can install a plugin, or I guess they don't even need a plugin. They can, if they're using, say, Chrome, for example, they can actually use Google Translate. Like, they can right click on the page and click Translate or whatever. And it'll actually offer it to them. If their computer is set to Spanish and they go to your English language site, it'll say, do you want to translate this, up at the top? But to have that built into your site, you'd need a plugin that I don't think you get with the free version of WordPress.com.
Right. And also, the other thing to be careful when you're using Google Translate is that it's not a perfect translation of the
No, it is not.
really, you know, world-class Spanish. I mean, it's going to give you, this is roughly the gist of what you're reading here. So if you're going to do that for business, I would encourage you to get somebody who's a native speaker and writer in the language to go over the document and correct that for you and get that in as close to perfect Spanish as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Okay, and the other question here was from Franklin, who unfortunately left. He says, if I understand correctly, if I build a WordPress site, then only people with a WordPress account can see my page.
No, 100% no. So the misunderstanding there, hopefully that got cleared up before he left. But basically, yeah, okay, yeah, good. If you have a WordPress.com site set for private, then everyone who's authorized to visit everyone who's authorized to visit the site has basically has to have a WordPress.com account and has to be specifically authorized by the owner of the site. But that's only if your site is set to private. And so as long as you set it to public with or without the little, you know, don't allow websites to or search engines to index this, as long as it's set to, you know, as long as it is set to public, that's not, that won't be a concern.
All right, we're a few minutes over, but there are two very important questions that came in here at the last minute. Lavana want to know,
Cool.
when do we click on launch site? And Glenn want to know, where is the save draft button?
Okay. So the save draft button is specifically if you are editing a, you know, if you're creating or you're editing a page or a post on your site. If you don't have a, if you're just making changes to your site in general, like you're changing themes or those sorts of things, there'll be some sort of save button that's specifically for that particular action that you're taking. Or there may not need to be a save button. Usually there is, like you change the setting and then you hit save. But yeah, a save draft button only appears if you're working on a page or a post, and obviously only if you've made changes. If you just pull up the editor, which we're going to talk about tomorrow, but you don't put anything on your page, then there's no save draft button, because what have you got to save? So the sorry, what was the other one?
The other one was when do you hit publish?
So oh, right. So the whole thing of like making your site live or whatever, personally what I would do is I would get it approximately the way you want it, and then I would use that option, because there's, I mean, obviously you can get really bogged down with minutia if you are of the mindset where that happens, but at the end of the day, you want to have a pretty good, you want to have things mostly set up, and no like major rough edges before you launch, so that way you're giving people a good impression when they visit your site. That's what I would do.
All right, and that finished.
Oh, that was the questions. I just remembered one other thing. Let me show, if you don't mind, let me switch back for a sec. Let me show them that. Okay.
You have the con.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, y'all are seeing it. So the last thing that I want to show everybody at the very end here is, if at any point you need to sign out, if you're using a shared computer of some sort, or if you just want to see your site the way that your audience sees it or whatever, you'll want to click on your little profile picture or your profile picture stand-in up at the top there and click log out. And then the other thing is, when you're ready to go and make changes to your site again, after you've closed your browser window or whatever, in order to get back there, you'll need to go to the address of your site. So in my case, it's CALS ASBTDC 520.wordpress.com. So you go to the address of your site, but then you add to the end of the address /WP-admin. By the way, that's a /, same key as the question mark. You never use a / in a web address. So it's the address of your site /WP-admin. If I press enter right now, that is going to take me to the dashboard of my site, which I mentioned a moment ago. And if I want to get back to the navigation tools that I was using, that I'm using for most of the class, click on My Sites up here in the top corner. And if you're not signed into your WordPress.com account, it'll prompt you to sign in. Okay, that's really it.
All right. Again, good job there on the presentation.
Thanks.
So just want to remind everybody, this is being brought to you by the Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center, and you can reach out to us for additional assistance with your business. We are a partnership with the U.S. Small Business Administration. They fund an ASBTDC program in 50 states and 6 territories. Here in Arkansas, the University of Arkansas at Little Rock College of Business has that contract. We, in turn, work with 6 other universities, providing 8 offices throughout the state, and that allows us to serve all 75 counties. So, again, if you think we can be a resource, please